We are live at the Clean Power Hour. It's November 17th. I'm Tim Montague, your co-host. November 17th, 2022. We're going to be doing a deep dive into what it means to develop and sell C&I solar with my co-host, John Weaver, the commercial solar guy. And we're going to be doing our usual news roundup. Very excited also to let our listeners know that Scott Nguyen of Bodhi Solar will be joining us on stage here during the show. So excited to bring Scott on stage. But welcome to the show, John Weaver, commercial solar guy.
Hey, Tim. How you doing today? Hope everything's all right for you.
Got to see you yesterday and today. What a treat. And
that's because we're stalking each other, Tim. We want to talk about solar so much. We just kind of follow each other around the internet. So.
I am definitely a solar stalker. There is no doubt about that. And if you own a commercial facility, a school, a factory, I love solarizing factories. Please reach out to me or John, because we can help you put solar on that facility and turn it into a clean, green electron machine. And we are cleaning the grid, by gigawatts and gigawatts right now. It's a very exciting time in the energy transition, which may not be a phrase that most lay people recognize, but us here in the energy industry know that that is our mission. We are speeding the energy transition, and it's a good thing for the future of humanity. So this is a very feel-good industry. If you're not in solar, wind, or battery storage yet, you want to get into that. And John and I can also help you if you're a professional trying to eke your way forward into a new and better career. So reach out to us at cleanpowerhour.com. That's where all of our content lives. And we're doing one-on-one interviews and then this weekly news roundup. So John, let's talk C&I solar before we bring Scott on onto the stage and talk about the soft cost of solar. When you what I want to do is just kind of soup to nuts. Yep. And we actually did this, if you recall, in our very first episode now a couple years ago. But I think facility owners and energy professionals who are not familiar with C&I solar need more and better information about what is involved. And, we're talking about putting black panels, the panels you see behind me, either on your roof or your ground next to your facility. It's a both work. The roof does need to be in good condition. And so the facility immediately confronts you, John, when you're dealing with rooftop solar, right? What's the deal with the facility?
Well, I mean, your building is your target. Everything about the facility matters. Where is it located? How many trees are around it? What's the roof look like? How do you get on the roof? Where's the electrical? How are you going to get the electrical to your roof?
What is the roof condition? That is my very first question for the facility owner.
That really,
how old is your roof?
Yeah. I mean, a roof that's within I don't know if you have a term for it, but the dead zone is always depressing. It's, because you have a roof, you have to pay, let's say $5 to $10 per square foot for a roof. And let's say your roof is 100,000 square feet. That's $500,000 to $1 million for a capital expenditure of a thing that's not actually going to make you money. It's just going to exist. And it's going to make you not lose money, of course, because you want a roof. But if you got $1 million roof and your roof is 1 to 5 years old, great. We could put solar on it because your roof's timeline will be long. And our solar will make your roof last a tiny bit longer. Now, if you have a roof that's 19 years old, great. Again, even 15 to 20, if let's say you have a 20-year-old roof, because it's okay to replace your roof at the end of its life. Then you have a new roof and new solar, bam. And you have a nice lifelong pairing, great. But if you have a roof that's in the 7-year to 15-year range, you have a roof that still has half of its life, $500,000 of life in it. How do you come to terms with putting a solar project on it that might need to be taken off in 10 years for an expensive amount of money? So roofing is, you're right, Tim. I think roofing should be the first question. It's pretty close to it for me as well.
And then if the roof is old, and needs to be augmented or replaced, then we would immediately look for ground mount opportunities. You can augment the roof. You can replace the roof, of course.
Mhm.
But if you have 20 years left of life in your roof, you're probably woe to make a major investment in upgrading your roof. So you do need to have a roof in good condition or ground around your facility. And we love ground mount solar because it's so visible. It's easier to maintain, and it's a little more expensive to develop. You have to get more permits. So it is a little longer of a process and a little more expensive, um, but I love both. I love rooftop solar, ground mount solar. What, you said it doesn't, I guess maybe you were talking about the roof, but solar at the end of the day is reducing your power bill. A good solar facility could reduce your power bill by 50 to 75%. If you're grid connected, you're still going to have a bill. You'll never reduce your bill to zero unless you go off grid with solar batteries. And that is a possibility, a growing possibility with the technology that we have today in 2022. But that is a big investment on the front end, or a much bigger investment. So what are those conversations like, I guess, John, that you're having with facility owners? What do facility owners need to know about rooftop solar?
What it's going to cost, how long it's going to take to pay back, what the best ways to pay for it are, how long will the hardware last, how long would the installation take?
Yeah, let's
those
dive
are
into
some of
some
the
of
key.
those. On the construction side of things, what is the lifetime of a solar installation project? If things go swimmingly, what does it take? 0 to 60?
25 years is a number I give with
No, I'm not
as a
saying how long is it going to last, but how long does it
oh
take to
so
develop and construct a solar project if things go swimmingly?
that depends on the market, with your applications and incentives that follow it. So in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, it can take up to a year, sometimes 6 months easily, for a project to be approved for interconnection and incentives. In a state like Pennsylvania, where there's no incentives and there's minimal amounts of solar, you can be starting construction in 3 months, 2 months after applying for it. So the start of construction, at least getting through your first bureaucratic processes, can be anywhere from 3 months, 2 months through 6 months, sometimes longer. And then you got permits and product procurement. You'll add another 1 to 4 months there, depending on what components you have to buy. A lot of times for right now, your electric panel is a long wait time component. There's a lot of missing components around the world to make electric panels, and you could be waiting 6 to 8 months for that piece alone. So you have to strategically order it. And, after you got your first 3 to 6 months to get paperwork, and then 1 to 4 months for procurement and permits, then construction is quickish for a commercial rooftop project. 2 months, 4 months, somewhere in that range. If we're doing 250 to 500 kW, at least for us, we have
Yeah,
smaller
I say
teams.
3 to 6 months, but
Yeah.
that's true. The actual construction is the shortest waiting, perhaps.
Mhm.
You made some good points about, markets are local. Solar is different in Massachusetts than it is in Illinois, is different than it is in Colorado or California or Arizona. And so you want to make sure that you're working with a developer or installer that is knowledgeable in your jurisdiction.
Yes.
And I try to be an expert on everything Midwest, especially Illinois, since we are the hottest market in the Midwest, with major incentives. We are paying system owners something like 40% of the system value in the first 7 years in a cash incentive called renewable energy credits. And that does, what that does is it shortens the payback period, right? If we don't have incentives, and you have cheap power like we have here in Illinois, although power prices are going up, and we're going to be talking about that in the news segment here, power prices are doubling in some areas of the US or tripling. So that, but solar's regional, and that's a double edge. You just have to make sure, if you're a facility owner, make sure you're working with somebody who really knows the jurisdiction that your building is in, and knows how to acquire those incentives. But you don't have to finance a solar project either yourself. And that's the cool thing about solar. You could do a PPA, a power purchase agreement. That's my primary business when I develop solar projects is the developer will own the asset and then sell the power from the array to the off-taker. They get a discount, so they save money. An industrial off-taker in Illinois could save between $100,000 and $300,000 a year with a rooftop solar project doing third-party ownership. So there's no money out of pocket. And then you're reducing your power bill by hundreds of thousands of dollars per year, millions of dollars over a 20-year contract lifetime. And so it literally is free savings, although you have to invest some time and money in working through the process, so to speak. So it's not a zero investment, but it's a $0 investment, which is nice. Then you can do other things with your money. So there's many ways to skin this cat. What else would or should facility owners and operators know in your mind about these things we call solar arrays?
Well, when you really get into the operator versus just an owner, the operator cares significantly about the operations and maintenance of the system. And, the number one thing I tell people, there are 3 O&M contracts you can buy. Your first O&M contract can be the a la carte. You have a local electrician, maybe even the one who participated in construction, or your solar company, and you don't really need to pay for O&M. What you need to do is have somebody familiar with your system and internally watch your system. And this is the challenge, because you may not have somebody at your company who's going to check out your system every couple of days and make sure the numbers are up. You can set up email alerts. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. But watching that system and making sure it's running is an important step, because when you do see something in your numbers where they're off, you can call your contractor and say, hey, looks like my inverter is funny. Looks like my production numbers are low. Help me out here. Maybe log in, pay a small fee, have them review it, or have them do a site roll, pay a little bit more money. But the key is that you only pay your contractor when you need them. In the first year, you might need that help a couple times, because sometimes fuses pop, wiring is a little bit loose, things need to be discovered. Once those things are fixed, though, your system can sometimes go for years without needing any technical support. So this model of a la carte works if you're a group who is going to watch. The next model is like a hybrid. Locally, a partner we work with, they will do the monitoring. They will have a team who look at every single one of your inverters, every single one of your modules, and say, hey, here's what's going on. We can see your numbers. We can see your production. Things look good. Things don't. When something goes weird, they'll call you, or they will sign a contract with you to send somebody out to check it out. And this model for us, we charge about $750 a year to do the monitoring, and additional money for truck rolls. Truck rolls meaning sending an electrician out there to look at the site. Then you could go a third model. And this is, I just call it the Cadillac service. And it's from a group named Omnidian. And so Omnidian offers solar insurance. More than that, that's probably the wrong word to use. But they offer a power production guarantee at like 95% of your system's output. And they guarantee that they'll watch it. They give you a full 30-year warranty, something really strong. They offer very, very strong warranty and support. And each one of these has a different cost. Your local electrician who's a la carte, there'll be the minimum. Your service in the middle plus annual site visits, that'll be another cost. And then your high-end cost is Omnidian. But I will say this, you could get away with that a la carte service and pay your electrician to come out once a year. Have them walk the site and do spot checks for loose stuff, a loose module from a lot of wind, or maybe some loose wiring. Because those, other than your inverter, those are those things that you could watch and get away with it. So O&M, it's not bad. You have some options on how you do it. Some cheap, some a little more expensive, but O&M, I think it's a good thing to talk about.
I'm glad you mentioned Omnidian. Mark Liffman, the CEO of Omnidian, was on the show, episode 78. Check that out at cleanpowerhour.com. We have to move on. We will periodically do this conversation about C&I solar because it is so vital that more facility owners understand that this is a tremendous economic opportunity to save money and go green. I want to cover a story this morning or this afternoon from PV Magazine, authored by Ryan Kennedy, about the soft costs of solar, and especially in this case, residential solar. And to help us with this discussion, we're going to bring our friend Scott Nguyen into the conversation. And Scott is the founder of a company called Bodhi Solar. He was on the pod himself in episode 84, I believe, earlier this year. And without further ado, I will get him to join us here, and then I will put this story from PV Magazine on the screen. We solar professionals, we talk about this stack of things that cumulatively are the cost of a solar project. Hello, Scott Nguyen. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Tim. Hi, John. Hey, thanks for having
Scott.
me.
Good to see you again.
Great to meet you, John.
Nice to meet you.
Real quick, Scott, for our listeners, would you introduce yourself and what you're up to at Bodhi Solar?
All right. Yeah, real quick. I'm Scott Nguyen, the co-founder CEO of Bodhi. We are a software platform for residential solar. What we kind of best thing I like to say is that residential solar companies, especially the ones that are growing, they're pretty good at selling solar, pretty good at installing it, but they need help providing that digital experience that their customers expect. And so they can use our platform to be that digital interface between them and their customers, from contract through the installation commissioning process, but then throughout the 25-year life of that customer relationship as well.
Great. And I invite you, Scott, to come back to the show, and I'm very keen to have a conversation with you and one of your customers so that we can really lay out for our listeners what is the advantage of using a platform like Bodhi. I'm a true believer that this end-to-end relationship is very, very important, and it is oft neglected by installers who see themselves as kind of a one-hit wonder. As Barry Cinnamon recently pointed out on the Energy Show, which is a wonderful podcast. If you're not familiar with Barry's show, check that out. But Barry points out that, yes, today they might be doing a $20,000 solar project, but tomorrow they're going to be doing another $20,000 upgrade to their electrical infrastructure because they're installing an EV charger and a battery for resiliency and grid services. And so you need to start to see your customer as a much longer term relationship, and that will serve everyone involved, right? It's going to force us in the solar industry to provide better customer service, and it's going to be a virtuous cycle, right? Because we're going to have more happy consumers referring their friends and neighbors to these wonderful installers and developers who did a good job taking care of them. But let's talk about this story in PV Magazine. I'm going to put this on screen. And, the U.S. Solar industry is booming. This article points out that we're expected to grow at about 10% a year in the residential space for the next several years. And so the title is Tackling Soft Cost and Crossing the Chasm in U.S. Residential Solar Adoption. And Ryan lays out this wonderful graph of how soft costs are broken down. And real quick, I will just explain this. So there's hardware cost, which is the bottom of the stack here. That's generally fixed, although it does ebb and flow over time as the prices of copper and solar panels and inverters change over time. But then you have overhead, you have sales and marketing. That's where Bodhi comes in, and supply chain costs, permitting, inspection, interconnection. This is a big one. The DOE is tackling this big time. Installation labor and sales tax. And the shocking thing is that the soft costs of solar in the US are relatively high compared to our peer group in places like Northern Europe and Australia. So I'll just throw it out there, John and Scott, what are your thoughts about this phenomenon, and what is the good, the bad, and the ugly?
Oh man, there's so much. There's so much to unpack there, Tim. So this 65% number on soft costs, it's not new. It's actually been that amount for a good number of years now. You know, the prices of hardware have been, steadily coming down. There have been supply chain issues which have risen some of the equipment costs the past couple of years. But what's surprising is that one of the biggest factors of that, so there's two kind of big factors that go into that total cost. It's the customer acquisition cost. So that's all sales and marketing. That's actually been rising over the past 5 to 10 years. I mean, it used to be maybe 15%, but it's now up to 20, 25%. And so they've got I think the amount there, it was listed around 18, 20%. And I think there's a big range between the national players versus the regional companies. And we can go into why more of that. And then, yeah, you've got a lot of the overhead. Residential solar isn't as cookie cutter as we like to think about it. And just like John was talking about with all the CNI, with that process, one has to go through the same thing, because in the end, we're still building a power plant on people's roofs. And it's not easy. And so there is a lot of support that's needed. And so I think it's a little bit, even though it's broken down in those kind of fashion, I would say, you got sales, which, companies are doing actually pretty well within sales, especially when there was the low interest rates. We're getting into this high interest rate environment. We'll have to definitely talk about that too. But then you divide that into the operations. And there have been many companies who have not figured out the operations side of the business, who've done well on the sales side, haven't done well on the operations side. And a lot of companies have gone bankrupt because of that. And so, I mean, those are just my initial thoughts. Just generally, I think we can dive into each and every one of those aspects.
Yeah, and I should point out that John Weaver is a legit residential solar installer with his company, Whaling City Solar. Check out that company, Whaling City Solar, if you're in the Northeast.
Oh, are you working with Adam Gent, John?
Yes, sir.
All right. Okay,
Yep.
awesome. I've chatted with Adam in the past. He's a great guy.
Yeah, he has probably tested your software. I think he's gone through all kinds of different softwares, platforms that he's tested.
He's never tested. We've chatted a lot, because we've chatted a lot about what he needs to build out his software stack. And so he's definitely seen, and we've had, we still have a really good relationship on that discussion. And as y'all's company grows, really the key question is, how do you continue to grow profitably? When you're just starting out, all of us are just hustling. We're doing everything right. But at some point, and we see this with growing solar companies across the US, is that as you start to scale, there's a couple of things that we realize is, like, the first thing to drop off is customer communications. And this goes back to kind of some of the operational costs that don't really get identified well. So you've got project management costs, but then you also have customer support costs on that. And as when you're a small company owner, you do everything. When we started our company, I was doing all sorts of stuff. But then as you start to grow, you start to realize, oh, wow, communication is going to fall off. Do I keep on hiring more and more folks? Or is there software and is there automation that can help? So I think that's kind of the key question.
Yeah, as you know, one of our goals with Whaling City Solar, Adam very specifically wants to keep his costs down so that his sales piece is lower, because there are a lot of sales teams who are just independent of the solar contractor. They just knock on doors, but they get paid a lot. And then they use financial tools that are very expensive for customers. So that 18% number, you can sometimes it's composed of what's called a dealer fee. And this dealer fee lets people get solar credit instant. So bam, you want to get a $45,000 loan? Bam. You want to get some batteries? You want to, even with some people, you can now do energy efficiency rolled up into that solar loan. You know, our goal is to have a lot of customer feedback, a lot of customers who recommend us, instead of paying really high prices and just having lots of random leads that were, you know, gotten via ways that we don't want. And so, so that is a direct question. It directly ties to software like yours. Can you get more word of mouth leads and offer them a better price, a more reasonable price, and knock down that acquisition cost? Because if you can knock down 10, 20%, bam, you just knocked off a year or two of the payback. And that's a big cost.
It's a big cost. So that's kind of the reason why. So there's what it's interesting. So there's a reason why the customer acquisition costs are so high, because I'll talk about this from an industry level, and then I'm going to start breaking it down. First off, as an industry level, solar is still relatively new. So the industry itself is still trying to sell the idea of, hey, homeowner, you should go solar. And then second, you actually have to, on top of that, you also, a company like Whaling Solar has to then go to that extra step of saying, hey, customer, I now want to sell you to go solar with me. So there's kind of like a double thing there, which is, I mean, that kind of leads to the high cost. And so there's this, because customer acquisition costs are so high, there's a lot of different ways of people that go about trying to generate leads. And so the sales, pre-sales and sales side is actually extremely difficult to do, because we're still trying to crack that nut of how to sell both the combination of people to go solar plus how to go solar with you. And so, you know, for example, you know, you can buy leads, and one of the, you know, you can buy leads for, you know, $30, but then that lead is being sold 10 times over. And so the homeowner who's like, oh, I was just surfing, I put my name into a form, and all of a sudden they get, within an hour, 10 different phone calls from 10 different people. It's likely that person's not actually going solar. My neighbor did that. He's like, I'm not doing this anymore. And so that's, you know, and then so when you look at the cost, you know, when you start, you know, factoring as a business owner, like, okay, what is that conversion rate? Well, there's a reason why some of these owners are like, sales, I mean, these leads that I buy, they're trash because they're only single digit. They're like 2-3% conversion rate. Going back to what you're saying, John, and this, you know, one of the things, solar is a consumer product. And I think that's one thing that the industry's only appreciated in the past few years. A lot of times, like, oh, it's all about the technology, all about the technology. But as we get away from the early adopters that that article was talking about, we're getting into this, you know, the I forgot what was that term that Ryan used in there, kind of the early part of the mass consumer, you know,
the early adopters.
Excuse me, what was that?
The early adopters.
The early adopters. What was that? And the other, so
then there's a chasm. We got to cross the chasm.
Yeah, cross this.
Yeah, so we're going from early adopters to early majority. We're crossing
that chasm at the moment. And so what they realize, what us as in the industry have to realize is that we've got all the consumer behavior that we need to figure out. And and this is where the referrals come in. And historically, referrals have always closed at about a 50% rate. So about at least 5 to 20 times that of cold leads. And this is why almost every single company out there has a referral incentive that they provide. Now, of course, that referral, and I've seen, I mean, the customers that we work with, we've seen from up to $1,000 for if a friend or a referral signs. We also have zero. We've got folks who are like, we don't provide an incentive. And I think this goes to the fact that the only reason people will refer is if they had a good experience, if they actually trust the company. And if we can do that, if we can rely on that, we can start to rely on the fact that referrals are so powerful. And then if we can start to lower those incentives, then this is where we can start to lower that really high cost of customer acquisition.
So I'm curious, in your experience, Scott, how does software help installers give a better customer experience? My aim is to reduce the soft cost of solar. I don't care really how we get there. I just care that we do that and that we are able to accelerate the rate of adoption, right? Because the task is big. To decarbonize, 40 gigatons of carbon out of our economy is a big job. And so it is an all hands on deck moment. And consumers are still relatively naive about solar. It depends on the market, of course. In California, you see it everywhere in the built environment now. And so it is going mainstream, and people want it because it offers resiliency against outages, which is a real thing in California. But in many jurisdictions, like where I live, we almost never have outages, and power is still relatively cheap, and solar is new. Now you are starting to see it because we have great legislation called CEJA, or the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, which incentivizes consumers to buy solar and get a shorter payback period. The payback period now for resi or commercial solar is 7 to 9 years. And that gets people's attention. But if you're an installer, why do you want a platform like Bodhi?
Yeah, and I was like, I'm not going to say Bodhi specifically, all installers should be using Bodhi, but software in general, what is the promise and what's the advantage of using software, incorporating a really effective software stack into a solar company? And the way that we like to think about it is, as a company grows, there's just going to be a lot more challenges. And you can always say, like, an owner will be like, oh man, I wish all my sales folks can be as good as my top sales folks. I wish all my project managers could be as good as my project manager, because they're doing certain things that are great, and that's why they're great. But what are they doing? Let's take the referral example, let's take that as an example. The top sales folks are always consistently following up after their sale. So they'll be like, I'm going to have a great sales process. I'm going to hope my operations team delivers a good experience. If not, I'm going to make sure that I can clean up a little bit of that mess. I can also take the time to always, when the system's installed, call a check-in. Say, hey, I just saw the photos of the panels being installed. What do you think? Sounds great. Hey, do you have any friends or neighbors that want to also think of going solar when the system gets powered on? So they have this innate sense, the top perform sales folks will have this innate sense of always asking for those referrals. That does not happen across the sales team if it's not built into the culture of the company. What you can do with software is you can pull, because if you're using a CRM, you can have all that customer information, and then, for example, you can then pull that into software tools like Bodhi, which focuses on that customer engagement, we can actually pull in all the customer information, all the project information, all the documents, field apps, even into integrating with the monitoring hardware that's installed with the panels. And pulling in all that data, we can then be able to personalize any sort of outreach to those customers, and we can schedule that so that it is automatic. So in that sense, one of the ways to think about this is you can take the best practices of your best folks and then systematize that across your entire company. So for the sales folks, it's like, I'm going to make all of my entire sales team just as good as my top guys so that I'm elevating the whole. I'm going to get my operations team to be just as good as my best project manager or my best field technician. And I'm going to elevate my entire organization. And you can do this a lot less expensive than trying to hire top performers across the company. So that is, I think, an example of how software specifically can be a big advantage for the companies that are growing and know that the owner has to realize that they just can't, the economy, they need to be able to leverage the economies of scale, leverage technology to be able to grow into a more sustainable, large, fast-paced growing business.
The best example for me of software innovation came in 2014-ish for me, when Helioscope came out.
Sure.
And instead of me having to hire engineers to do designs and do site visits and climb on roofs and use ladders, bring a pickup truck, I could show up at a customer's house the first time I ever met them and have a proposal with a drawing, with hardware, with a financial analysis. And here's the key, it was done by me, the sales guy, from my laptop. And I was able to print out some PDFs and paperclip it, hand it to a human being. And when I brought that tool to a commercial company where I worked, it pretty much gave 3/4 of an engineer his job back to be, instead of a sales engineer, to be a project engineer. And that piece of software right there for $100 a month, you had one sales guy, two sales guys doing these layouts for all the other sales guys, saved tens of thousands of dollars over the course of the year.
Yeah.
And now, Adam Gent of our residential company, the first thing he does every morning is that we're experimenting with energy sage leads right now. Very low close rate, but you just got a whole bunch of them and they're geographically located. And Adam's able to pop out proposals, full designs, financial models, shade analysis, all kinds of stuff using Aurora. Now, Aurora is, historically, Aurora and Energy and Helioscope were separate companies. Helioscope was focused on commercial, Aurora was residential, then Aurora bought Helioscope. So we'll see how that goes. But, the Aurora tool is great, beautiful design, beautiful proposal output. I got a guy who's not a finance guy. He's a mechanical engineer. He's able to pop out 10 proposals, 15 proposals from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. That's what he does, Monday through Thursday. He joins me when I write for PV Magazine USA. So I got, 2 hours from 8 to 10. I try to put out articles, and Adam joins us and he hangs out. He just does his proposals. And we can do things really awesome with some software tools. And a follow-up tool sounds great. Just communicate with the customer, let them know what's going on, and they like it.
And I'll say another thing. I mean, kind of in the same vein. I mean, what's interesting is that, a lot of times it's the thought is like, a lot of times, and this is true, is that software is helping, reduce, staff costs. And so as a company is growing, they'll be able to handle more projects per staff member, either sales or on the operations side. But one thing that we realized that was actually really pretty interesting too was for Bodhi on the operations side, project managers. So what the project managers, they spend 50% of their time talking to customers. and interacting with customer inquiries and such. And then the other 50% of their time, they're actually working on the project, executing on that project. And so by a lot of what like Bodhi does in terms of pulling information, engaging the customer with updates and such, a lot of that information that we are sending and automating are relatively simple and routine. And what one of our customers told us, and the CEO is like, it's great. I'm enjoying that. We've reduced our customer support costs 30-50%. But what's really been great is that the project managers now have the bandwidth to actually handle the more complicated projects, the more demanding customers. And this is where essentially software has allowed them to not have to do routine, simple tasks, but use their human talents to do the more complicated things that we're actually better able to do anyways. So, so those are some intangibles or some other aspects of software that don't fully get taken account when you start looking at just kind of a broad statistics or so.
I want to expand on that real quick, that very quick. A salesperson has to take care of pipeline and existing projects. And if you get out of sync with either one of those, you start messing up as your sales guy. Because if you're as a salesperson, if you're not making new leads and filling up your pipeline, then in 2 or 3 months, you're going to suddenly have no paycheck. And the key is it's worse than just a paycheck. You're suddenly going to have installation team members who don't have work. And you can't just send people home with their base salary. That doesn't mean for efficiency. So you have to figure out the art of the new and the current. You got to take care of what's coming, and you got to take care of what's already with you. And that's an art. And if you can figure out this way, and with my company, my goal is to have a salesperson plus a project manager, a business development project manager working closely together, so that your salesperson's always knocking, bringing out new leads, gaining notes, shaking a hand, and your project manager in the office is making sure the document flow follows the salesperson, the project refinements, the new financial model, the updated this. And so you got to keep both of these machines, both of these legs pounding in order to have a consistent long-term machine. And if you can figure out a structure to help with that software, that's big.
I mean, a lot of the companies that we work with, they do separate sales and operations. So it is separate, where sales is all about finding, working the deals, finding a new sale. And then operations is all about executing. But when there isn't this balance that you're talking about, John, what happens, we've pulled sales folks, they're trying to, their money is made in the sales side, but some of them definitely as a salesperson, you always develop this rapport with customers, especially if you're a good salesperson. You're developing rapport with your customers, so you kind of feel tied to them. And so when a customer doesn't get the information they need, or just a simple question, hey, what's the status of my project, from operations? Who's that customer going to call? It's going to call the sales guy. Sales guy's like, oh, okay, I'm on this. Let me go check. And when we polled the sales folks, they're spending 15-20% of their time, dealing with existing projects when if they're not out there trying to find a new deal. And so I think that's, if you have a really good balance, like you were talking about, John, then the sales folks can focus on finding new deals. The operations are going to focus on executing. And then, it makes for a lot more sustainable business overall.
This is a great conversation. I resonate deeply with this topic, and also how companies integrate sales and operations. I think that is an opportunity to do a deeper integration, because sometimes the salespeople don't take full responsibility for what it is that they're selling, that someone else is going to have to install, and vice versa. The operations side doesn't necessarily have the salesperson's best interest in mind, which comes full circle, right? Because At the end of the day, we're all serving the same customer.
Yeah, but one of the things, just like on that topic, part of that article, the PV article, PV magazine article, it kind of, there's a sentence in there. I was a little bit I didn't realize this, but it was about cancellations. And there was a sentence in the article that said, hey, they found out that for every 1 week delay due to permitting, interconnection, various approvals there, any 1 week delay there actually increases the cancellation rate 10%.
Oof.
And that's
Yeah.
huge. And it was funny because yesterday, and then, cancellation rates, depending upon the business models, can be pretty wildly varying. So yesterday I was actually moderating another webinar. Tim, it was called the ethical solar sales to maximize commissions or something like that. We were just talking about how do you do things ethically, but cancellation rates came up, and someone asked, an audience member asked, what is a typical cancellation rate in residential solar? And so for all the installers that are using Bodhi, it's like less than 5%. I think it's really about 2 to 3%. But I heard from John, who's the COO of Skyline Solar up in New Jersey, really established company. They've been around, I think 10, at least maybe 15 years. And so he's an EPC. So he actually works with sales organizations. And this is where it goes back to what you were talking about, Tim, where sales folks might be selling something and operations folks are like, what did you sell them? What did you promise these folks? Because this, now I'm talking to them, and it's not their cancellation. Some of these sales organizations cancellation rates are in the 20 to 30%. And I'm not saying 20, I'm not saying like average. I think the average cancellation rate for sales organizations is between 20 to 30. It's not like there's one or two folks. It is between 20 to 30%.
That means somebody's 50% somewhere.
Yes. That's
That
what
would
John
make-
told me. John told me that as an EPC, he's seen that. He doesn't work with those companies because it's just not worth it.
Well, hey, we need to move on and cover a few more stories. Scott, you're welcome to join us.
We're kicking you off, Scott. Too much conversation.
Is related and that this story is about high electricity rates pushing homeowners. I would say homeowners and business owners to consider solar. This is a new phenomenon in the US. It's not new in Europe. I like to say, if you want to see the future of solar, go to Europe or Australia. And they are 10 years ahead of us. And the reason for that is that energy is expensive in Europe. And so they're incentivized to consider alternatives, and solar being a great one. So this story is by Ann Fisher at PV Magazine. Somehow we missed this earlier in last month, but rising electric rates, grid instability, environmental concerns, and decreased solar costs are all reasons for homeowners to go solar. And there's a nice chart here that how will homeowners handle rising electric rates? And then we'll talk about this phenomenon. But number one is conservation, reducing electrical usage, right? That's a great way. We call that the negawatt. Turn off the lights, get an energy audit, install LED lighting, et cetera, right? Upgrade your insulation, upgrade your windows, consider or immediately install solar. Yay. Consumers are actually freaking out right now about energy prices in the United States. And I think this is a good thing, even though it does hurt at the pocketbook. We need to pay the true cost of energy, for one, and be more aware that there are ramifications for all the cheap energy that we've had access to over the decades. And now there's a reckoning. The good news is we can actually reduce the burden, right, by encouraging people to go solar. You can save money on your power bill. You can reduce your power bill by 50 to 75% by installing rooftop solar. And in some places, the payback period is very reasonable, like Illinois. We see a 7 to 9 year payback period. you can save about $900 on average in Illinois. And that number is just going up now as energy prices go up. The other thing around energy rates is that solar happens in markets, and that's true here in the US, that have more expensive power, like where John lives. In Boston, you're paying probably at least 2, maybe 3 times what we're paying here in Illinois. So John, first, what are your thoughts about how electric rates are influencing consumer habits?
I feel really bad for being happy that the price of electricity has gone up. I'm sorry. I'll say it out loud and be honest. And I'll say another thing though. I'm happy that electricity is going up because we're starting finally to realize what the value of this society building thing is. And, you know, if we actually say paid a carbon tax and paid attention to the actual cost of our energy, it'd be a whole different conversation. But price of electricity, without a doubt, is driving it in Massachusetts. Adam in our Resi company, he has showed me, and I found it hard to believe. I had to do the bills myself. He showed me bills in the low 30 cents per kilowatt hour range. And I thought that was only in Hawaii or crazy places like Upper Peninsula Michigan or Alaska. But no, it's in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. And we should expect that these prices should continue to go up a little bit more because the full cost of natural gas has not worked itself through the system. You know, the price of gas has increased from $2 to $3 per kilogram. It touched 10. Now it's in the 4 to 5 range, but these offshore LNG facilities or these exporting LNG facilities are picking up, and, you know, Europe's calming down now, but as we start exporting more, we're going to be in the 5 to 8, $10 per kilogram or $10 per million BTUs range. And it's pushing business and it's pushing residential. Interestingly, it's pushing small business accounts a lot because small business accounts have a higher effect on kWh pricing because they have lesser demand charges. And the smallest accounts, like say the general small business with a minimum with zero demand charge, those are actually the ones who are feeling it the most right now because their absolute dollar amount is increasing by 10, 20, 30% in different markets. And we're finding that small business owners right now in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, even some without incentives, are having paybacks of like 5 or 6 years. They do get some strong incentives in terms of a sort of net metering because Massachusetts' net metering is here and there. But it's the price of electricity, without a doubt, is driving demand for residential and small business significantly. And it's, I don't think it's stopping. You know, price isn't going down.
Can I add to that? Do you know what the hottest market or one of the hottest markets in the States are? The deregulated markets of Texas, around Houston, North Austin, Dallas area. And you know why? Going back to everything that you guys have been said, we had that
Storm
big
Uri?
blackout. Yeah, the storm of the I call it the Texas blackouts of 2021? I don't even remember. It was I mean, I was completely affected in terms of just having zero power for 45, 48 hours and just freezing my ass off the house. But the reason why the solar is the hottest market in the deregulated markets, and these are my parents, this is my sister. They used to, you know, in the deregulated markets, you had all sorts of retailers. I think they had folks, they had signed up with companies, retailers where they're paying 8 cents per kilowatt hour. Those companies went out of business because of that blackout. And what's the true cost now? Well, now they're paying for them to sign up for a new retailer, electric retailer. They're paying 20 to 25 cents per kilowatt hour. And that's just specifically my parents, my sister, and I think that's all of that region. And that's why the fastest growing solar companies are the ones that are servicing that Houston, Dallas, deregulated market, because now we start seeing that true cost starting to come in, and it's tough. But then I think a lot of those folks are choosing to go solar.
Interesting.
when bad things happen, whether that's an outage because of a storm like we had in Texas in 2021 or fires in California. I mean, I feel very, very lucky that I haven't had significant outages where I live here in Central Illinois in the last 10 years, really. Doesn't mean they won't happen ever. Of course they will. Ice storms are the biggest concern that we have here in Illinois, but yeah, it's a very interesting time in the US. And then we have IRA, right? The Inflation Reduction Act, which is really helping reduce the costs of solar for consumers. We have 30% investment tax credit. You can apply the tax credit to the interconnection costs of DG solar. So whether this is consumer owned, business owner owning the array, or a PPA, this reduces everybody's costs, soup to nuts. And but energy is going to get more expensive. There's just, the writing is on the wall, and so buckle up and go solar. If you're a facility owner, a homeowner, there's really no better time. And so, John, should we cover any more stories? We have just a couple of minutes. It's been a great conversation, though. I have to say, I really enjoyed this format. So thank you for joining us, Scott Nguyen from Bodhi Solar. And yeah, I guess we could do one more story, but pretty close to sayonara.
Oh, I got so much work to do, Tim. I'm gonna go eat lunch. I'm happy that we had Scott on the phone. Now, Scott, you can call Adam back and be like, "Hey, John's telling me you guys need to do some better customer follow-up. What's going on?"
All right, I'll definitely do that. I mean, I'll follow up.
Well,
yeah,
Adam actually asked a question on our webinar yesterday, which was, how can what's the best way to convey the difference between cash and financing prices to a consumer? Of course, I mean, on the call was the head of business development at Goodleap.
Oh.
So,
hey, you know what? There's a challenge there. These companies won't buy, like, there's credit laws, and I don't understand this because I'm not in the resi world, but there's credit laws that say you're not allowed to tell your customer the with credit amount and the cash amount. Like, you're not allowed to tell the customer these two separate numbers. And there's like a dance that you have to follow.
For
those,
those,
like, what the hell?
For those that are interested in that answer, Greg Fisher, head of business development at Goodleap, addressed that directly in the webinar. I think we're going to be posting it soon on our YouTube channel. So for those that are listening in and want to hear specifically Greg's answer to that, tune into our YouTube channel. It'll probably be up there in a few days or so.
All right, that's a good one.
Well, John,
where can people find you, Tim?
Another lovely live episode of the Clean Power Hour. How can our listeners find you, John Weaver, commercial solar guy?
Steve, Scott, did you see how I tried to jump in there and ask Tim where to find him, but he was done with it? Commercial solar guy, commercialsolarguy.com. That's our website. You can send us messages. I'm on LinkedIn all the time trying to share good stuff that I write for PV Mag. So just check out my LinkedIn profile, John Fitzgerald Weaver. And then Twitter, if Elon Musk doesn't break it, but Twitter, Solar and Mass. And then apparently now there's this new thing called Mastodon that everybody's going to, and I made an account there. So commercial solar guy on Mastodon, but I haven't actually used it. I just opened it and looked at it and felt lonely because the Twitter account has so many smart people that I follow, and it's just like, you people know so much. So any of those places, commercial solar guy, Twitter, Solar and Mass, and John Fitzgerald Weaver on LinkedIn. You can find me. Tim, what about you?
Give us thank you, John.
The internet. You can find me on the internet. How's that?
That's a good way to find me as well. But go to cleanpowerhour.com. That's where all of our content lives. Give us a rating and review on Apple and Spotify. That is how others will find this content. That's the most important thing, is that we're growing the energy transition. We need more people to know about this good, credible info. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can just click the YouTube icon there, and that will take you to the channel. And reach out to us. We love hearing from our listeners. Whether you have an idea for a guest or a topic for us to cover on the Clean Power Hour, please reach out to us. And there's a contact form right there on cleanpowerhour.com. I want to thank Scott Nguyen from Bodhi Solar. for joining us today. Take care, Scott. Take care, John. I'm Tim Montague.